Yeah. So there's a decent amount to unpack there. Regarding your citing your own journey. Um, I think that's true for a lot of people. You come for the money and you stay for the sovereignty. Bitcoin is a rabbit hole that leads to the idea of independence, self-sovereignty in all things, and it teaches us how to accomplish those things. Right? It touts decentralization as an essential principle. It touts trustlessness, personal responsibility. So Bitcoin really upholds certain principles that lead to self-sovereignty, independence, and ultimately, freedom in the broadest sense, just a free society of free thinking individuals. And so we are a natural progression of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin showed us the way, and is here to stay. We neither us nor anyone is a replacement of Bitcoin. We are an extension of it, a logical extrapolation of Bitcoin's message to the world, which is decentralization, trustlessness, self-sovereignty, personal responsibility. We're just applying that to computing in general. And the reason we're applying it to computing in general, which dovetails into the second part of your statements, is that the current model has problems. And the problems with the current model are not convenience, accessibility, stuff like that. The problems with the current model are mostly in negative space, as in you don't see the problems readily, which is why they were permitted to exist and grow, is because they were in negative space. You have to understand the way the systems work, and you have to study them or wait for the lava to seep through the cracks before you recognize that there is a problem brewing, right? You start to feel the tremor in the ground and you're like, wait a second, something is wrong. What is it? And what it is centralization, right? The idea of creating honeypots of value. So with Bitcoin, it's about you honeypot a bunch of Bitcoin onto an exchange, and that enhances the probability that that exchange is going to get hacked, because the risk reward, the effort reward ratio makes it worthwhile, right? So you're willing to pump in a fortune and time and energy to hack a large centralized Bitcoin exchange because the payout is massive. So you're willing to take the risk and pay the expense. But when you have everyone in the world holding their own keys, holding their own coins, then the effort to extract the same amount of money is exponentially larger, right? It's orders of magnitude larger by however many people you've spread it out with. So it's a basic tenet in security, actually, is not to put everything in one place, not all your eggs in one basket. And the same applies to data, right? When you honeypot massive amounts of data into a single server or behind a single set of keys, the chances of it getting hacked are near certain at a certain level of value, right? It's an inevitability because these things are protected by humans, right? We talk about encryption and sort of application security, AppSec, and that stuff's pretty good, right? There's nothing wrong with encryption. It works really well. In fact, we have decades of experience building secure digital systems. And it's not like some hacker, with enormous skill can just sort of like fight their way through these systems. Like you can't brute force encryption. So how do you hack, right? Hacking is done through people. You hack people. So any human being, right, all the data at these companies might be protected by encryption, but there are ultimately people who have the keys to decrypt. Otherwise, the data is useless if no human can ever access it. So we know that there are humans who can access data. And so long as there are humans, there is vulnerability because humans are fallible. We are corruptible, we are bribable, we are blackmailable, we can be coerced. It's going to happen. If there's something to hack and there's a human guarding it, eventually that human will succumb to some force. So that's the essence of the problem, is that we've sort of honeypotted all this data into the hands of into very few places. The second part is communications. So the access points themselves. So there's data, which we mostly think of as privacy, right? Like this is confidential information. that has value, and it needs to remain confidential and secure. And then there's access, which is the counterpart to that is censorship resistance. So the other problem with the computing infrastructure is that it is under the control, it's permissioned, right? That your ability to use one platform or another, or even to text message your significant other, is a permissioned action. You are essentially asking for permission every single time you want to do anything with your cloud computer. And if you find yourself on the wrong side of that judgment, either by the company that is permissioning your access or by a higher authority of the nation state, then you're out. You're cut off, right? Whether it's deplatformed from a social media platform or, again, just private messaging. It's not really your activity. You are renting that space. You are asking for permission. And so most of these things, the 2 points here, right? The honeypotting of data and the security vulnerability that creates, and the permissioned access and the censorship possibilities that creates, most often exist in negative space, as in most people, most days, don't feel the impact of those negative aspects um, because hacks don't happen very often, or at least that we know about, right? And you're not cut off and censored. And actually, there's a third. Well, I'm at it. I might as well cite the third problem is that when you have permissioned access to things as basic as data storage and communication, eventually, through centralization, those pipes and access points and storage facilities will be controlled by fewer and fewer and fewer people, fewer and fewer companies, ultimately resulting in oligarchic or monopolistic behavior, which means rent extraction, extortion. So you can expect that as we continue to centralize the cloud services, that the rents will go up. And there will come a day when you can't pay the rent, and they'll say, well, I guess you don't need to make phone calls or text message or do anything, right? You're so much of your life is dependent on these systems that being cut off is horrifying. And so you'll do anything to stay connected, including selling the farm. We don't see much of that today because the tech giants are all jockeying to become that monopoly. They all want to monopolize the space such that they can then squeeze and crank up the pressure, which is why they're all willing to make no money up front and figure it out later, because they know that once they own the pipes, then they can squeeze a little bit. So again, negative space, because almost everything you use today is quote free, right? As in it doesn't cost money. It costs you data and some privacy, et cetera, but it doesn't cost money. All 3 of those will change. Hacks will happen. You may or may not get cut off depending on which country you live in and who's in power at what time, and you will get squeezed for rent. And so eventually this system turns out to be a disaster for humans, even though to date it has been a godsend. It has been an amazing development of human history, global interconnectedness through cloud computing. But there has been a monster growing in the shadows. And it is only now starting to rear its teeth, and people are starting to get scared. And that's where we come in, is we offer an alternative to this future, an alternative where you, the individual, are in total direct sovereign control over your data, your communications, and it's all free by nature. It has to be. You pay for electricity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's pretty astounding. So when you say like they're squeezing the rent, what do you think that would look like in the future specifically? Like them charging for the service, or could it be even like the social implications like we see today? If you don't fit into this box, then you're not allowed on our platform. Or is there anything else that you think they could be doing with that?
So the latter, the you don't fit in, you don't belong on our platform, I would put more in the censorship box rather than the rent seeking squeezing behavior. The rent-seeking squeezing comes in two forms, right? As in they're squeezing value out of you. And you have two things of value to offer. One is your data, and the other is your money. And so we've already seen data squeezing practices. That happened first because the terms and conditions and the privacy policies just keep changing under our noses. And what we're not reading is increasing amounts of we value your privacy, which is why we only handle your data in these certain ways, right? But it is still, that is their means of revenue, right? Anytime you're using a free app, you are the product. Um, and so you can expect increasing amounts of abuse over your data. Certain laws in some jurisdictions sort of try at least to prevent abuse of personal data. And so they have to then turn to alternative means of making money, which would be subscriptions. So a lot of the apps now that you use, take like Adobe, for instance. The Adobe suite, like Illustrator, and used to be downloadable software, as in you would buy it. Same with Windows and Microsoft Office, right? You'd buy it and you would own it and you would run it on your computer. And you could create cloud backups either through Adobe or Microsoft or through your own backup system, or you could save it to a USB stick. But it was basically your software on your computer, and there were a certain number of licenses, number of computers that you could install it to. You can't do that anymore. There is no way to run the Adobe suite without Adobe Cloud. You actually can't buy their software anymore. You can only rent it because somebody decided or figured out that the number of customers who would be lost, and this is because Adobe has essentially, massive mind share and market share in this segment. Once they achieved that kind of brand recognition that like, hey, we own this corner, like when somebody thinks about how do you edit photos, they're going to think of Photoshop, right? So they own that corner. Obviously, there are competitors. And somebody at their company, rightfully from a business model perspective, figured out that by getting rid of the downloadable software and switching to a cloud-based model, their lifetime revenue of a customer would go from $300 to $300 a year, right? Or $150 a year. And that they're unlikely to cancel within 4 years. So we've essentially doubled or tripled the lifetime revenue expectation per customer. And some customers are not going to be okay with this and they're going to leave. Well, the number of customers who are going to leave are this percentage. So we've scratched them off and overall we're making more money than we were. And so it's a valid business decision. Like I don't blame Adobe for doing this, but what is the counterbalance? What is the alternative in the marketplace? Like when a customer is like, I don't like that. What happened to the people who left? Where did they go? When all companies are doing this, where do you go? There is no alternative. So we are trying to provide that alternative. We're trying to offer people a way to own their software once again, to own their computers once again, to not be renting. Every single time you pick up your phone or your computer, you're just renting space and time on somebody else's computer. In fact, many other people's computer, because every time you open a different app on your phone, you're just renting space for the period of time that you're using that app. And during that time, you're being charged for your data. They're just collecting everything they can about you. And you are paying potentially some of these things in addition with monthly subscriptions. And what I'm saying is that until something like us offers a significant counterbalance to that trend, there is no reason for it to stop. The data collection will continue and the rent-seeking subscription practices will raise. And I don't look at those companies and go, they're evil. They're stealing your data and they're charging you subscriptions. They're doing exactly what they can do, right? They're doing exactly what the market will bear. And so if you don't like it, you gotta buy something else. You gotta find an alternative, right? I'm for the free market. I don't go, oh, that should be illegal. Let's empower government more to tell Adobe they can't, that they need to offer downloadable software as opposed to cloud software. And it's like, no, I'm not for that either. What I am for is competition. So here we come.